I was watching Creepshow and I was trying to draw Ted Danson underwater with his head out there.
Perfect.
I like that episode. I love Creepshow, man. I really...
Yeah.
That movie holds a special place, like just because I was 1 when that movie came out, and I remember I saw it at 3 years old or 4 years old.
What?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh my God.
I swear to God, I've been watching horror movies for a long time, man. But yeah, that one scared the shit out of me when I was a kid.
I believe it. I can't believe you saw that when you were 3.
I watched all that shit, man. I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's film block that we call Horror Anthologies 101. In 1919, German silent film director Richard Oswald produced Uncanny Stories. I will not even try to pronounce it in German, a unique film split into 5 separate stories. Each of these stories were connected via one location, an antique bookshop where 3 figures, Death, the Devil, and the Harlot, step out of paintings in order to read aloud 5 stories written by 5 different authors. And so the anthology film was born. So, as I'm sure you've already figured out, today we'll be discussing horror anthology films, one of my favorite types of movies, and with that, I'm going to do something I have always wanted to do. Hello, kiddies. It's me, the Ghoul of the Grindhouse, here to present tonight's tasty trio of cinematic scares this side of the silver screen. Our first tale details a dreaded day in the life of Mr. Walter Craig. After arriving at the location of his latest architecture project, Mr. Craig can't shake the feeling that he's dreamt about this home. Is it deja vu, or has he been there before? Grab your driving gloves, your golf clubs, and the nearest possessed ventriloquist dummy and take a big bite out of 1945's dazzlingly diabolical Dead of Night. Poor Billy. All he wanted was to enjoy the latest issue of his favorite horror comic book. That is until his clueless, controlling cretin of an old man throws it out and gives the boy a walloping he won't soon forget. Billy's fine, though, and takes comfort in a curation of creepy chronicles that include an annual family get-together on Father's Day, a rich man's bug problem, and a lonesome farm boy who finds himself planted in quite the precarious position. Make sure you mail in your coupon for your very own voodoo doll from the back pages of 1982's Creepshow. 5 strange souls find themselves trapped within the walls of a macabre multiplex. A mysterious figure known as the Projectionist plays a special movie block of his own design, one that details the deepest and darkest dread that haunt each of these sinful cinephiles. These tasty tales include a man's attempt at saving the world from head-splitting spacefaring spiders, to a mother's need to cope with the deteriorating shifts of her twisted reality. Now that's entertainment. Pick up your ticket and find your seat. 2018's Nightmare Cinema is about to begin. That was super fun. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
I've seen you in my dreams. Sounds like a sentimental song, doesn't it? But how did I come to dream about you? And I've never set eyes on you in my life.
It's very likely you've seen my photograph in the papers. That's why my face seems familiar to you.
I don't think so. And even if it were, is that any reason why I should keep on dreaming about you?
All right, and welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I am Brian Foster. Here with me, as always, is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you?
I am stuck in a Mobius strip.
Yeah.
How are you?
That's very topical for today's amazing 3-film feature that we've got going on here. We're going to be talking about, we're going back to school for Anthology 101 today. Class is in session. We're watching horror anthology films, starting with 1945's Dead of Night, 1982's Creepshow, and 2018's Nightmare Cinema.
And I don't know about you, but I'm hot for teacher.
Wow. Wait, me? Am I the teacher in this?
Indeed.
Technically, I think that the roles that we've been playing in this show are that you're more of the teacher.
Okay. So I'm hot for myself.
Exactly. Yeah, you're hot for yourself. I really enjoy anthology films, especially when they're done right.
Totally.
Being done right, I think that means that there, is a through line, usually an epilogue, prologue, bookend, whatever you want to call it, a wrapper that is in itself its own story, but that story then becomes the hub, if you will, for all of the individual vignetted stories that we see throughout the film.
Right.
Dead of Night is, I guess, the oldest version of this, or at least the one that really, really did it right, and what a lot of these films are based on. And I got to say, this was a really exciting film.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't ever really heard of this one until we, were starting to put together this this film block.
Same.
I think I mentioned to you before that the only Dead of Night I was aware of was the Bob Clark one. But looking into this one, it turns out to be pretty influential, because it seemed like it was one of the earliest. I guess perhaps you could count, certain silent movies from, the UFA horror movies. But, film form was so different then that, I don't know if it counts.
Yeah.
I think this, when we're talking about horror anthologies, this one really, sort of set the mold and how to do this. And, horror or not, like I think this did kind of like set up, the way to do these like, semi-connected short films and put it into a movie.
Right.
And what was kind of cool about this, this film block in particular was that like we're starting with what was the, seminal horror anthology film with Dead of Night, ending with one of the most recent ones, Nightmare Cinema, and I think one of the most iconic with Creepshow. I mean, maybe you could argue Tales from the Crypt, but that was kind of a TV show. I don't know. Yeah,
but we could have done the British Tales from the Crypt, the one from '72, with Joan Collins and our boy Peter Cushing. Oh, also Trick or Treat. That was another one.
Well, because we'd also talked about maybe Tales from the Hood, but maybe we'll do that on the next horror anthology, or if we ever do a Clarence Williams III film block.
Candy makes you dandy. Yeah, I mean, I think we've mentioned this talking, is that this is a movie that's way ahead of its time. It feels very well paced for telling a lot of information and putting a lot out there. It really goes by at a nice clip. We are the wrapper in this instance, or the bookend, is this Mr. Craig shows up to some house in the middle of the countryside's beautiful home, where he meets 5 people, eventually 6 people, who he remembers for some reason. And he remembers the home, and he remembers where the coat hanger is, and he remembers where all these things are, because he says he's at one time seen this in a dream before, and he feels like he's in this dream. And I think that kind of sets up the initial mystery of what's happening here.
Yeah, I'd say in this one it's less of the bookend, which is, I guess, how you describe Creepshow, but more so like, the spine or sort of the center of the wheel.
Yeah, the hub. Yeah.
Along which all the spokes, kind of branch out of. Yeah, exactly. And, the idea is that this guy walks into this room and finds these people there, and he's like, hey, this all looks familiar. It's kind of deja vu. I feel like I've dreamed this. As they're talking about that, other people start telling, kind of creepy stories that they have experienced. And they kind of go around the room telling these stories until we sort of get to the end of all that, and we see where the sort of frame narrative, like the actual the hub narrative was going. In that, it actually like takes this ending that I really didn't see coming, which is sort of like tying in all of the little vignettes as the guy goes through this sort of chambers of nightmare at the end, to then sort of wake up and start it all over again.
Which, in my opinion, is the scariest part of this movie, because I'm not entirely sure if this guy is just caught in some sort of loop that is,
right.
He is in this limbo that he has to keep repeating itself Groundhog Day, like over and over again.
Yeah, Groundhog Day as like a 90% horror movie.
Yeah. Very supernatural in style. A lot of these episodes or segments within this film. We start with a race car driver who has a near-death accident. Pretty gnarly accident too. The race car driver scene, where he falls for his nurse, There's this long time that he's in recovery, and he is greeted by, I want to say, his death. A hearse with a driver that is very familiar to him says,
Just room for one inside, sir.
He's recovering in his hospital room, goes to the window and sees down below that there's a guy driving a hearse. In this case, it was a horse-drawn...
The hearse and buggy.
Yeah, hearse and buggy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he says room for one more, implying you're next
right,
dude. And then he goes about his life or whatever, thinking everything's normal, whatever. Isn't it as he's leaving the hospital, or was it some other time in his life?
Yes, because he is now fully recovered. He's gone through all of his rehab, and he's like a fresh start to life.
Right.
And the next thing he's about to do is get on a bus where he sees the bus driver is this same individual from his dream or from his vision.
Yeah, the same hearse driver.
And he says the same thing.
Just room for one inside, sir.
And so he decides that this is not the bus to get on today.
I'll
and
take
he
the
lets
next one. Yeah.
I'll take the next one. And luckily he did, because it turned into a miniature and got rolled off the side of a road. The bus is ultimately crashes, and I assume everyone dies inside. So it was kind of this final destination moment where he beat death.
Right. Like he learned the lesson from Final Destination. It's actually the anti-Final Destination movie. It's like,
right.
Instead of like he was supposed to die, it's like, he was able to dodge it successfully. But yeah, I mean, I really loved. I was obviously miniature work, but like the sort of choreography of the miniature and like the way it looked was really cool. If there was just maybe like 5% more realism to it, you could kind of buy it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was pretty close though.
Yeah, good. I mean, for 1945, there were quite a few special effects in this,
right.
Visual effects.
And that's another surprising thing is like that it came out in September 45. I mean, World War II was going up until May, when it was when Europe, at least the European theater was considered closed. I thought that this movie was like, was this like a library film that they finally released in September 45? But apparently not. Ealing and then some of these other studios there were, shooting throughout the war. They were doing kind of like, smaller films. And I wonder if maybe that too, I mean, I didn't look this up, this is just speculation, but I wonder if having, the state being occupied with other things, like they could kind of do something a little more experimental here, a little, because, horror movies weren't allowed for a while.
No, not at all.
With the English film system, and they kind of slipped this one past. But I wonder if, like, also just the, unconventional nature, the almost experimental nature of the film,
right, 'cause
was able to kind of get through.
They could have shot those short films in very similar places. They don't really go many places except for, that big living room or parlor where they're having most of their discussions, the flashbacks for each of the people that are in the room. But still, those are pretty compartmentalized as well to one spot.
How did we get the ventriloquist one? Oh, it's the doctor, right? The sort of comically German doctor.
Right, yeah, exactly. It was pretty on the nose with him. So there are 6 people in total there, and we get 5 stories. We get 6 stories, including the rapper. But the race car driver accident, there's a hide and seek game during a Christmas party where a girl meets a ghostly figure of a boy who was murdered there several years before in the 1800s.
Yeah, like 100 years before or something, yeah.
By his sister, I believe. I think that's how that worked. That was pretty creepy.
Right.
The mirror, there's a haunted mirror episode, which basically was a mirror that was showing a past place where the mirror once resided. I forgot who the association was, but it was basically haunted of this event more than anything that was kind of replaying within the mirror. That was interesting. And
again, that was, an event that happened in the 1800s.
Right.
With the hearse driver, when we see the hearse driver and he's doing the horse-drawn carriage, the horror elements of the Christmas party and the haunted mirror segments, all 3 of those, had this horror of the past. And I wonder if part of that was that the movie was kind of like struggling with that kind of history. And that's where the horror kind of came from, or, it was just kind of, that's something that like well, back then, creepy things could happen because, modern day, the horrors are, the
Right,
Luftwaffe, bombing cities and whatever. And like, this is more quaint horror of like, haunted this and ghost that.
A sweet little boy ghost, a sweet little mirror ghost that was.
But still, I find it interesting. Like, even if they're trying to reject the real world lived experience of the horrors of World War II and trying to harken back what they imagined, sort of romantic ideas of horror were. I do find it interesting that they, kind of reach back in time for that kind of horror. It made it kind of a safer type of horror, which is interesting.
This movie, again, was done in 45, and then the ones that they're talking about there. Oh, I see what you're saying. So those were like the 1860s is when the horror was supposed to happen. So that's still 80 years, right? It's still a kind of an old, before all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been outside of everyone's lifetime, right?
So there's some very recognizable scenes or segments in this, specifically the ventriloquist segment, which has been played on Twilight Zone episodes as part of different, storylines in movies like Magic and things in the 80s. Or was that 70s? Maybe it was 80s. Obviously, Child's Play has a bit in there too. The killer living ventriloquist dummy.
You forgot to mention Goosebumps.
Goosebumps.
I'm sure that they did
that's also the mirror one, right?
Also the mirror. Yeah, both of them felt very R.L. Stein-esque, or
yes,
more likely, he saw these movies and ingested them and turned them into kid stories.
One of the episodes though, and they all were relatively horror or supernatural in nature, specifically horror for most of them, but one of them had more of a comical tone to it. And if we're talking about, the 101 of anthology films, there's times that there is a fun that doesn't really match the tone of the others. And this match play golf episode that pops up out of nowhere is a very funny, and I think intentionally funny, the way that it's presented, the horror in this one.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was a marketed change in tone. It seemed intentional, because they're first of all, they're playing on the audience's expectations. I mean, like the two main guys in the story, Basil Radford and Naughton Wayne, those two guys out of one of Hitchcock's best movies, The Lady Vanishes, and those two guys appeared in that movie. The sort of exact same characters, and then a couple other characters from Lady Vanishes appear in another movie, Night Train to Munich, which it's basically they took sort of the key players of one movie and just like, okay, well, we'll just put them on another train and have them on another adventure.
The all-stars.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like A Fish Called Wanda and Fierce Creatures or something, where it's like, it's not a sequel, but it's the same characters, playing different roles. Those two guys out of Lady Vanishes and then Night Train to Munich, and then they had maybe a dozen other films where they were kind of the Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis duo, Laurel Hardy kind of thing, where it's like they were a comedy duo and very recognizable, and they're always recognizable as being the comic relief. Lady Vanishes isn't exactly a comedy. I mean, it has a lot of funny aspects to it. I mean, it's like, Hitchcock does that a lot, where it's like he'll take his suspense movies and put humor into them. And Hitchcock balances that really well. Like, this one in particular, it felt like there are all these kind of, almost all gothic horror, sort of straight horror with the dummy, the ventriloquist story. And then there's this one, which is like the actual scenario itself is horrifying.
Absolutely. You're being haunted. Yeah.
But the way it's presented is like, it is comical.
Not so much that this guy's just being haunted by his rival and friend, I'd call him, right? Rival and best friend.
Yeah.
But the way that the guy offs himself after this golf game, he just walks himself into the drink. Like literally, like on the golf course.
Right.
He's like, now he's the water hazard. I was like, Jesus Christ, this is like a terrible way for a golfer to go, is to drown in the water hazard that you probably screwed like two strokes on your last hole.
It's like the origin story of Jason is to just drown himself, and like
kind of creepy to watch him walk in the water. But yeah, he comes back, and he comes back as a spirit that really doesn't know how to handle his powers. He doesn't know how to handle his materialization. He didn't go to his materialization class or pay attention to it, I think he puts it. But really, these guys are in a golf match for a woman. And they're like arguing over this woman right in front of her. Like it's a really
no, because she wasn't really there at that moment, right? And it's like they're
now I understand.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, and also sort of like because it was so comical and like we didn't quite know at that point, you know, the part you're talking about where they're arguing over her, we didn't quite know what the tone of this thing was going to be yet.
No,
you know, even though I sort of recognized those guys from Lady Vanishes and had the inkling that they were going to be comic relief, I didn't quite know where the thing was going yet. And so it's like, yeah, it is very weird that she was there, but like it seemed like that was kind of magic realism, and it was them talking about her, and it's like cueing the audience, who are they talking about? Oh, it's the one in the middle there, who's kind of not responding to them until the very, very end with a gentleman's agreement. And it was like, you know, they were arguing over like who would be able to ask her out, essentially. And like, but yeah, then they play a golf game for the asking rights, and then yeah, one of them
a golf game to the death though.
Well,
it was.
Death
because one of them had to be dead in order for the other one to actually have a shot at the other one. Isn't that the discussion that they're having?
Oh, is that how that worked? He was like,
so literally, the way that they put it is, "I wish you were dead." That's what the one guy says, and the other guy's like, "And I feel the same about you." He's like, "If one of us were dead, then we could just go ask her without any problem."
Right, okay.
Wish you were dead, old man.
Just as good if you were.
George,
I've got it.
we'll play for her.
Tomorrow morning, 18 holes.
Match play?
The loser to vanish from the scene.
Forever.
Put it there, then.
Of course. Why didn't we think of it sooner?
That's a vicious game of golf, man.
I thought he was like so, furious about losing the game that he did the big trouble or whatever, like, just like
that was the bet,
offing himself like through rage or whatever.
There's an episode of Tales from the Crypt that's just like this, only like way more graphic and violent.
Yeah.
It was with Lance Henriksen, our boy Lance Henriksen.
Oh, nice.
And I can't remember the other guy's name, but I'll look it up. But they have, they go through, they're basically gamblers that go through different types of games together, one of them being Russian roulette, and then one of them being chop poker, and it just keeps ramping up. And that kind of reminded me of this, where these two guys were battling to the death over golf, over some girl, right?
Right. So I mean,
and the guy cheated on the 18th hole. That's just hilarious.
It is pretty dark, but it's like
it is.
It's presented. I mean, like, if you hadn't cast those two actors, you could imagine just like, playing it straight.
Exactly. Which I like that, because it again kind of gave a little bit of levity to what was ultimately a pretty dark film.
Yeah.
Each of these episodes.
Especially with the ventriloquist story and the capper on the end of this, of him sort of running through everybody's nightmare and then waking up and having to step back into the, the Sonny and Cher song and, oh, it's cold out there.
They say our love won't pay the rent. More return of money. That's all I was thinking about when that movie ended. And I'm like, oh, it's happening again, and it's just really cool. And I'm like,
Phil, Ned,
Phil, hey, Phil Connors,
Ned.
So yeah, I mean, obviously there's some really great scenes in this. This movie had, in my opinion, the most polished of the films in terms of, I don't know, just from when it was done, like the mood that it evoked and everything. I thought that this was a really, really well done movie.
And I think most of that feeling you had about it was like how well they were able to kind of stick the landing. And it's like, the last vignette about the ventriloquist was so good, and it was like, it was, such sort of, straight horror.
Yes.
And then on top of that, when we got out of it, they found a good way to sort of wrap up that spine that they kept coming back to. With that wrap up and him running through everybody's nightmare and like starting the whole thing over again, like it really kind of brought it home, and you're like, okay, sitting through this whole movie like paid off.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just sort of like an excuse to tell these, disparate stories. They found a way to kind of weave the whole thing together, because the main guy,
Mr. Craig
runs through, sort of, I may have mentioned this earlier, but he runs through sort of everybody's, horrifying scenario, and he does it really quickly, but it
5 minutes,
and it feels like a nightmare he's having, and it has that dream logic of you are talking to someone, and then all of a sudden it's not that person anymore, but you don't react. It's not like, oh, that's weird. It just is not that person, and then you are standing in one room, you turn and you're in another place altogether. Had that whole way of experiencing things that only sort of somehow make sense in a dream, but obviously doesn't make sense when you start to explain it.
Mr. Craig compared it to a thunderstorm at night. How a dream, you remember a dream, it's just little flashes of memory that you get. And then, like a flash will happen and you're somewhere else. A flash will happen and someone else is there. And that's exactly, I thought that was a really smart way to put it, because I feel the same way when I have dreams. Because I'll be in school or something, like 6th grade, and I'll be sitting there with my old 6th grade teacher, and all of a sudden I'll look over and I'm in the grocery store.
Right.
Like literally, and I think that this movie really succeeded in that, especially that end sequence. Again, it really truncated all of the events that we got to see played out individually from each of these characters. But those like superpowers from each of those stories were like truncated into one, and he got to use each one of those to get out of the dream. But again, is he like back in this? So
and then there's sort of like no escaping. That's
kind of creeps me out about that. I feel like he's stuck in this loop.
Yeah, well, because it's funny because like I think before we started recording, you were talking about how Martin Scorsese had been influenced by this movie, and how he was really scared by it. And I was thinking like, man, like if the movie had stopped at the golf story before we get into the ventriloquist or something, like there wasn't much that was really that scary about it. Now maybe it's because some of these things have become sort of well trodden tropes with like you look into a mirror and you don't see what's behind you and you see something else, and like, or the Christmas party where you're seeing a ghost or something. I think the ventriloquist story itself was actually really well done as a horror story. I mean, first of all, we get to see a younger Michael Redgrave, a more I don't know, he looked a lot younger than 10 years, which is also part of one of the things that I was thinking, oh, maybe this wasn't shot in 45.
Oh, I see.
But compared to the Dam Busters, I mean, where it's like and maybe part of it was in the Dam Busters, he's supposed to be playing someone older.
Did people age a lot in 10 years then? I mean, a lot of cigarettes at the time, right?
Maybe a stressful 10 years. But, Michael Redgrave was great in the ventriloquist story. And he starts off kind of this sort of, straight performer and is doing this act to getting to the part where he thought that, or it seemed as if he was being sort of controlled by this dummy, to the part where he's in the jail and he's sweaty and beard stubbly and just like really falling apart mentally, to then at the very end when it's like he has gone full Norman Bates,
full Hugo Bates, full Hugo.
Yeah, Hugo Bates. They'll say, Hugo, you didn't even harm a fly.
Exactly. It felt like Psycho, definitely. Yeah, I thought that was great that there was that, like the psychosis about that, right? Like there was just something, multiple personalities, and just really strong.
Right, and at the beginning, you weren't really sure if it was going to be like, okay, is the puppet really alive?
Right.
Is it?
That was great.
Yeah.
I still question it. I mean, I know what they were trying to serve by the end of that one, but it still is like they really set it up nice.
Well, especially since you see sort of objectively that the puppet gets up and walks across the room, and it's like clearly a child or a little person or something.
Right.
Even though it was very obvious that it wasn't the same wooden dummy, it was really, really creepy and really effective.
It was creepy because it was a kid wearing the mask of that dummy, and it wasn't on that great, and it just looked scary. Right. And the way he like climbs up on the bed, I was like, Jesus Christ!
I know, it was good, and like I think because they stuck the landing so well with this one, like you really like feel like it worked perhaps even better than it even deserves. I mean, because like the hearse driver story, I felt like that one was pretty tight for a short film. The Christmas party, Haunted Mirror, those felt a little longer than they needed to be, and maybe that's again because these stories are a little more fresh and they haven't become fully, absorbed into horror tropes. One of the earlier films to do these stories had to like kind of like explain it a little more than you'd think. And then the golfer story, because it's a little, it's the odd man out there. Had it just been those four, even with the Mobius strip ending, like it might not have like gotten there, but because the dummy one was actually pretty scary, and the way that they were able to kind of like do the being John Malkovich weaving through all the all the little dreams at the end there, and then get it that he's like stuck in this loop, it actually worked really, really well. And it because it ends so well, it punches you so hard with the horror at the end, it feels like the movie overall was very effective. It because it leaves you on such a high note, it kind of like fools you into forgetting that like some of it was a little slow or whatever else in the middle.
Which I think is the art of ultimately putting these kinds of films out. It's similar to setting up a song list or a track list at a show, right, at a concert.
Yeah.
You've got those lulls in the middle somewhere, but you want to end on those high notes, start on those high notes, and this movie did achieve that in many ways. And the ending, you get two good endings, one right after the other, and then. Right. In my opinion, the spine, as you're calling it, of the film, was the scariest part of it. Just because I keep thinking that this guy. So you keep saying Mobius,
Mobius strip, where it's like it's like an infinity,
right? Gotcha.
Like piece where it just like it never
and that's
ends,
what
right?
scares me. Like he's locked in this infinity loop that is.
Part of the thing that like makes it is like that. It has these twists and turns in it, but like it turns out it's all just one thing, and you keep going back and forth.
Because in many ways, the people that we meet in the house, they don't really connect until the very end. And then all of a sudden, all of those stories make sense as to why we need them. And in fact, we didn't really need them. He just takes part in all those to get himself out of that dream state.
And that's, I guess, maybe what makes this one kind of unique. I mean... Creepshow, for instance, has the comic book that they kind of like zoom in and out of. Nightmare Cinema, had the movie theater.
I'm the projectionist, sweetie pie.
But this one actually like tied all of those things together. That in a story that was like that bridged everything together, as opposed to just being. Okay, we're done with this segment. How do we transition to the next one? Who cares? Let's just move on to the next one. It was
a transition in Creepshow, if anything.
Yeah, exactly. Like Creepshow had the pull in, pull out star wipes and the comic book just like worked as a transition in that sense. And like and it's fine because Creepshow is just supposed to be going through that comic book. Or if you think of what's it called? Tales from the Crypt or whatever. Like it's just they'll come back out. The Crypt Keeper will, throw out some puns and then move on to the next segment. It's like, nothing's connected. But this one, they kind of they brought everything together and really paid off the interstitial like host segments.
Yeah, and I think that's the right word is paid off, and I think that this movie pays it off big time. Let's move on to Creepshow.
It's about time.
George A. Romero's tribute to EC horror comics.
Yeah.
Obviously, one of my favorite movies of all time. It has my favorite director, and it has a bunch of cool effects by Tom Savini. And
it was written by my favorite author, Stephen King. And
one of the segments starring, as well as Joe Hill, his son.
Yeah.
I mean, we could get into the story a little bit. I mean, like you were talking about the bookends. This is bookended by Tom Atkins and his family. His son is Joe Hill. Tom Atkins is an abusive parent that doesn't want Joe Hill to be reading that horror crap, that horror comic crap that he always has.
You see that crap? All that horror crap?
So at one point the kid kind of mouths off to him and he gives him a licking, so not too good, but...
Kind of. I mean, he slapped the taste out of that kid's face.
I say there's a big red mark on the kid's face after it happens too, so it's like, did he really do that?
Yeah.
But soon after, the kid who now has his comic book taken away by his dad is greeted by the creep at his window, who is basically the crypt keeper of this version of the comic books, who is
sort of
just that host that brings you through, and hey kitties, that brings you through all the different segments and things like that, and
with 100% less puns.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't say anything at all, really, unless you actually read the panels. This is definitely leaning heavily into the EC horror comics. It was clear what the motivation for all the effects and the transitions and things were for this, and it wasn't trying to shy away from that. But I mean, I'd love to talk about how this one, I mean, obviously is different from Dead of Night, as we don't really have that spine through line, but we do have a storyline that we come back to that bookends this. So it's in a way a different format, but that bookend kind of uses that to introduce us to the comic book, which becomes the transitions, and then it goes back as the comic book is found by the garbage men at the end. Then we're back into reality. Tom Savini making his appearance.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way illustrates like why Dead of Night was so good, was that the father-son story that are in the bookends, you totally like lose it in the middle here.
Right.
In Dead of Night, that they really found a way to like really make that part of the fabric of it. That being said, I do really like Creepshow, and the point of Creepshow is it's horror, and it's kind of gross out in some certain places, but it's mostly just supposed to be fun.
Absolutely.
And like the humor is a big part of it. I mean, like the just sort of absurd amount of time that Ed Harris sits under that tomb for whatever reason. Like, wait, what's happening? Is it sliding off its pedestal and gonna fall onto my face?
The noise it makes too.
He's like, I'm just gonna hang out here for a second and see where this goes.
I love that part though, when he before that, don't let go, that music they're dancing to, and he does that one move with his head. I wish that was something we could portray better on a podcast, but that was. Ed Harris is in. I mean, a star-studded
sound effect or
yeah, or something.
We need to have a lot more Brian singing on here.
I agree. We're definitely gonna loop that a little bit. So let's go into the first episode, which is Father's Day, starring Ed Harris.
Bring me my cake.
A star-studded cast for this. There's quite a few top. I'd say, well, I mean, there's a few Academy Award winners in there, as eventually, not at this point, but I think Ed Harris has won, correct? And so has Hal Holbrook, more recently, Hal Holbrook.
Yeah, I mean, you got E.G. Marshall, 12 Angry Men, and, of course, Christmas Vacation.
E.G., I need to go eat lunch because I got to take my back pills. Leslie Nielsen, Ted Danson. Stephen King makes an appearance. It's just like you said, it's a really fun movie. Going into the first episode, it's a traditional revenge tale told from the perspective of a family that murdered a man who was an asshole that actually comes back to murder the whole family that murdered him for being an asshole. I think there's no real motivation for him coming back other than, I want my cake.
Yeah.
Bedelia!
He's got the really watery, boggy voice.
Kind of a consistent motif throughout this is that sound, because I believe Jordy Verrill does that too in his segment.
Yeah, and the
Ted Danson,
the creatures out of the fog in the Ted Danson one or whatever.
The fog, yeah.
Tying back to Adrienne Barbeau.
Father's Day is about a woman named Bedelia that falls in love with a man. This man is ultimately killed by her father because her father is a terrible person. She then kills her father on Father's Day. And then every year after that, she goes to visit his grave, which is on the home, or on the on the land of the home. Yeah, it's in the front yard of this house.
I mean, this is Knives Out 1.0.
I love this segment so much. I think that we're talking about Vivica Lindfors, I believe is her name, that plays Aunt Bedelia, has a really great moment when she is drunk and sitting by the gravestone. And she's kind of just given the business to her late father, who's then wakes up because she's yelling at him, and then that's when that great John Harrison piano gong 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 starts playing, and it just gets wild. So he comes back to life and starts murdering people one by one. She's first. We mentioned Ed Harris's death, which is probably him waiting underneath a tombstone that's probably about 2.5 tons that's about to fall on him.
Yeah, and it doesn't actually, just come out of nowhere and surprise him. He's like, he always keeps looking back, looking down, looking back. Is that really going to happen?
It's the guy waiting for
the
the steamroller to hit him in Austin Powers.
Yeah. This one, I think the Something to Tide You Over and The Crate in particular, all of those had this sort of very interesting moral ambiguity or whatever, where it's like, there's sort of no one likable in it in a way. It's like the guy who was the curmudgeonly, maybe perhaps dementia-addled father or whatever, is awful. He gets killed, so okay, maybe you feel bad for him. And then, the rest of his family is just awful. They just get off one by one. Maybe is Ed Harris the one you feel bad for the most? I don't know.
I do, just because of his dance moves, and he didn't do anything bad. He wasn't really part of this. All he did was go out to see if Bedelia was okay. Really, he was doing the right thing, and then he got smashed.
What I should say is the audience's allegiances are what flip and flop back and forth as these things change.
Sure.
Just like in the Leslie Nielsen story, where it's like, okay,
Something to Tide You Over.
He finds, Ted Danson sleeping with his wife and, goes to, exact some revenge from Ted Danson. And then, of course, it goes, I don't know what, beyond the a reasonable response and kills the guy.
You mean Leslie Nielsen isn't reasonable?
Yeah, exactly. And then
he's far from reasonable in this one.
Far from reasonable.
I'm trying to figure out exactly what his character is. Some sort of AV nut serial killer. He just loves TV, loves cables, and great picture quality.
This one's also a little, Father's Day like in the sense that it's about some guy who's just extremely wealthy and extremely crazy, and that leads to whereas in Father's Day the motivation for the murder was to get this guy out of their life and then get his money. This one is he keeps saying I know it's about what keeping what's mine or something like that. Right?
He never wanted to give up anything. He doesn't. He never loved her. He just wanted to keep her.
Yeah, exactly. And that's in both of those, there's this idea of this these possessions and and how it rots the brain. And in that one, at first, okay, you hate Ted Danson because he's a scumbag, and then you feel bad for him, and then that they're going after Leslie Nielsen, and then he gets starts to become really pathetic, and he can't seem to stop these waterlogged zombies, and then by the end, are you feeling the horror for Leslie Nielsen, or is it they got him?
I feel that. I say answer choice B, at least from my perspective. It was it was one of those Tales from the Crypts or one of these stories where the person does get their just desserts, right? At the end, and it usually ends up being the reanimated corpse of whoever he killed or something like that.
Oh, and Romero did it again. So I think you mentioned this when we were talking about the Day of the Dead, during the little maze sequence at the end of the movie when it's there's these red lights in the cave and you see a headshot to a zombie.
And it's clear.
And it looks clear because the red light that's illuminating the red blood makes it all look one color. And they kind of did this in this one as well. If it was water, because they were, waterlogged monsters from the deep who I guess had been waterlogged for, 30
hours.
years or something. Yeah, exactly.
The tide pulled them out.
Yeah,
that's all it is. They went blub, 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 blub. I love Leslie Nielsen in this one. I think he's legitimately creepy in this.
Yeah, well, and where was this in the world of Airplane and because Leslie Nielsen was kind of had a interesting career where he started off as kind of a regular sort of leading man and all this, and then sort of took that persona and used it ironically in all the sort of Zucker world. Mm-hmm. Of Airplane and
because wasn't he in the Poseidon Adventure back in the day? That was a big drama.
Yeah, exactly. And And the Naked Gun and all that. Like, when did that start? Was that that was after this, right?
But before that was Police Squad, which was on television. So that was
So I guess right. So Airplane is 1980. Like Police Squad. I guess that is right around the same time. Yeah, for a certain generation, Leslie Nielsen was just the sort of goofy ham.
Frank Drebin.
Yeah, in this period of time, 1982 is like he had been in Airplane, but Police Squad was just starting at the time this movie came out, and Naked Guns and whatever hadn't come out yet. So it's like, in the one sense, it feels like he's playing against type, but really it's like he was doing roles that he would have normally been doing before his persona from the Airplane world, sort of became the only thing people knew him for. But yeah, I mean, that being said, he was really, really great in it. I mean, because he is so menacing and so horrible.
Horrible, and yeah, exactly. Just really calm about it too.
He sells the psychopath like really, really well.
And there's a cameo from Fran from Dawn of the Dead, Fly Girl, Galen
really?
Ross. Yeah, she's Becky. She's the other person, and yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
So I think we should talk about, because we skipped it, is the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill. The Color Out of Space Light, or however you want to call it. But this is the one starring Stephen King, so I figured you'd want to at least discuss this one. Based on a short story named Weeds that he wrote.
I meant to look this up earlier as well, but I think it, so he had another story, Gray Matter, that was, similar in a way, especially when you consider the ending of this. But I mean, like that one is probably my favorite segment of the movie.
It's your favorite segment of the movie?
I think so. What else is better?
Okay, so this is interesting because I figured, because tonally that one is different than the rest of the movie, because it is a little bit more comedic, but it does nail the horror. Yeah. Right? It has that cool balance. I'm very shocked that this is your favorite one. I figured something like E.G. Marshall's would have been your favorite one. Creeping Up on You.
Yeah. I mean,
just because I like his performance is so good in that, and it's just him. It is just him in this weird, semi-futuristic, weird. Right. Well, let's get back to Jordy Verrill.
2001 apartment,
right? Things get sucked down into his desk,
and I think definitely cockroaches were harmed in the making of this film.
Oh God, yeah, definitely on screen. There's no way that they didn't all make it out of there fine, because there were thousands of them. I think Romero has been in interviews that said that they probably donated hundreds of African cockroaches to the Pittsburgh area after that shoot. Like they said, they lost a lot. But what are you going to do? Okay, so back to Jordy Verrill. Again, Color Out of Space, definitely some Lovecraft inspiration in this storyline.
Definitely a ripoff of Color Out of Space. I mean, the entire conceit is, he's on a farm. A meteor comes out of nowhere, and particularly in Color Out of Space, like that meteor comes, it hits the family of the farmers, whatever, in Color Out of Space. Consider like the same thing as maybe if they can get rich off this thing, and then it ends up having this effect of their crops grow a lot, but it's sort of like
terrible.
the sort of monkey's paw, where it's they're huge, but they're horrible.
Water makes you sick.
In Color Out of Space, it lasts weeks and months and whatever to have this thing take over. And the Jordy Verrill story, it happens really quickly. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's very much inspired by that. Only it's a single person and not a family, and it
works for a short story.
Yeah, exactly. And Stephen King is such a goof in it.
He's great in it.
It balances everything so well. It's it's funny. It's really sad. The sort of the title of it, The Lonesome Death. I mean, it's reference to the Bob Dylan song, but the loneliness you see in this guy, and how he thinks of himself as a failure when he imagines his dad there, and then the ending where it's pretty tragic, and the horror of it is probably the most horrific, I think, in the movie. I think it hits you the most, and then it also,
what he says is terrible too.
Yeah, exactly. But
it's please God, don't let me miss. Right before he does it, and then it just happens, and it's Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So I mean, I think it's like the one that like has that effect the most. Now, even though like okay, maybe the creeping up on you, that it's so nasty when those bugs are coming out of them, and the Walking Dead and Father's Day and Tide You Over, those things are horrifying, and they do have like the things that get horror crowds excited, which is violence and nastiness. Yeah. But there's something like it's like so tragic about the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill, that like and the fact that he was able to thread the needle of like going from that comedy to the sort of horrific tragedy. All of those elements really kind of make it the number one for me.
And then we brought up The Crate, starring Hal Holbrook, Adrienne Barbeau. This is an interesting one, and I remember before we were recording, you said that you had something specific to talk about this because I brought up Fluffy the monster in this one. So this one's about a crate that's found on a college campus that's from an expedition, according to the side of the box, an expedition from the late 1800s from the Antarctic, I believe. And it's no one knows what it is, so these a janitor or a custodian finds it, calls up the local professor Stanley to come and open this thing up, and when they open it up, they unleash a tiny little creature that will literally swallow you alive, I believe, because it happens pretty fast.
He must be taking some bites, because it's not like he swallows you whole, because there's a lot of blood. But like whenever we see the monster, it's in the sort of abstract world of like, okay, you get that crazy lighting,
the eyes.
It reminded me of the very end of Big Trouble, when we see at the back of the Pork Chop Express, there's the sort of Bigfoot monster back there.
With no
and this thing looked a lot like that as well. I mean, and it's funny, like the rules on this monster. It's like, okay, does it stay inside? Does it not? And like, think of like how much work it took them to like open the thing in the first place. And like, anyway,
because it goes back. It said it felt safe in that place. Like that's what they said at one point. Because it after the initial letting of it out, it crawls back in, and then it brings the crate back to its original place underneath those stairs.
This one, like, was my least favorite of the bunch. It's definitely like too long for what it is. Like it's like and there has these like really disconnected ideas in it. It feels like of like the Hal Holbrook, Adrienne Barbeau, like
Billy. Call me Billy.
He's tired of her. Everything she says is right, but her tone is just awful. You know what I mean? She's just like she's like too.
She just isn't really rude. Good in a social situation.
Yeah. Then again, she's not wrong. She's just rude. But and because of that, Hal Holbrook sentences her to death by, woodland ape, or whatever that thing was, Antarctic woodland ape.
Antarctic woodland ape, yes, an AWA. That's what it is.
And it starts off with the janitor. Okay, is it the janitor story? Oh, then there's the professor. Oh, is it the professor story? No, apparently it's Hal Holbrook's, and is he getting revenge? No, he's just like, his wife's is embarrassing at parties, and rides his nuts when he's fucking up, and it's like so I guess she deserves to die. This one also kind of like has that ambiguity about sort of like who am I following here? Like who's the good guy here? Nobody.
No one. Yeah, no one. Well, like you said, I mean, most of these, I don't think there is a good person in any of these.
Right.
Like everyone gets what they deserve. And everyone gets fucked up in this one,
but
man.
But that's the difference with the Jordy Verrill one. Like, he's not a bad guy.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And that's the part that like kind of makes this whole thing stand out. And one other thing to say about that, because I'm just gonna continue talking about Jordy Verrill until you cut me off. But like the idea is like it takes this absurdist look at sort of rural poverty. It also drives home some poignant things, like where he's talking about like the sort of horrors of the for-profit healthcare system, where it's like he can't. He was like, I'm gonna go call the doctor. Oh wait, no, I can't afford it or whatever. And like,
he'll have to remove those fingers. Yeah.
So it's like, not that the doctor couldn't do anything with this alien whatever, but like,
sure.
The whole idea of like what is weighing down on this guy is all sort of too real, and he's a tragic character.
Yeah. What's weighing down on him specifically is a $200 loan that he's looking to get paid back. That's literally his story. He's like, pay off that bank loan. I wonder what they'd give me for it up the college. On the flip side of rural Pennsylvania, They're Creeping Up on You is about E.G. Marshall playing Upton Pratt, who is this rich, uppity dude that lives in a clean house. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it, as an ultra clean house. Everything's white and covered in vacuums and sterilizer, and
it's like the Alien Zoo at the end of 2001, where it's just like what the aliens think, a museum or whatever, a habitat for humans looks like, and it's sort of this weird, light coming from the ground, and everything's white, and everything just looks weird. Like oh man, how funny is it? Like, in both Creeping Up on You and Something to Tide You Over, like how the architecture, like the sort of the modern architecture there, like it's just like so horrifying. Like the most horrifying part of the movie was not Jordy Verrill's death; it was the architecture and Leslie Nielsen's place.
Which place? His
Interior
beach place?
design, I guess.
The beach place he was at wasn't it all like Japanese rice paper walls and stuff like that?
Well, and it was like these, like carpeted banisters and just all this weird wood paneling and stuff. And like,
you wouldn't carpet your banisters? Like, your hands need some nice cushion too,
Yeah, exactly. It's practical.
E.G. Marshall is living in his, at the time, $3,200 a month penthouse apartment that's got a bug problem.
That's what you get for only paying $3,200 a month.
Exactly, cheap ass. He's got this bug problem, and he keeps saying that. And obviously, being a rich man, his bug problem isn't just the bugs, literally the cockroaches that are crawling in his place, but they're also all of his employees and the people that he talks to on the phone, like a complete jagoff. I mean, just a terrible human being.
Like, there's no overtime, asshole.
He's happy that one of his board members shot himself, I believe, or hung himself or killed himself, and he's like, oh, looks like we don't need his vote anymore. It's like, Jesus. God. Terrible. And ultimately he dies from being, he's scared to death, and he has a heart attack. And then after a while, his dead body then produces a fuck ton of bugs that just crawl out of him in every single whole piece of skin. I mean, it's definitely one of those, like you said, those shocking moments that was probably one of those like Scream Fest when it played in the theaters and people talked about that. It just was one of those signatures, like little stamp on.
I mean, and it's still really nasty. Like, even in the moments where you can tell it's not him or whatever, it's still messed up. And it actually, like, the gag of something crawling under his skin.
Oh yeah, that was good.
Specifically on his forehead.
Yeah,
they do the same gag, and I'm maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more.
Oh yeah,
in Thing in the Woods, which is one of the Nightmare Cinema shows. But Nightmare Cinema, they do it with computer generated little waveform across his forehead. In this one, it's the Savini practical thing, and there's something so much more viscerally disgusting about it. And if you're going for the horror, wouldn't you want to be more visceral?
Yes, you would, and I agree.
Having sort of the moving bladder or whatever.
Yes.
On top of your head or whatever. It's the same kind of like queasiness you see or feel when the transformation first starts to happen in The Howling, where it's like all that,
And he does a lot. Bottin did a lot. Like, American Werewolf in London was a little bit less of that, but Bottin his face was like almost like boiling.
Right, exactly. He was sort of rolling boil on his head, but like, maybe you could have
turn it down to a simmer, Rob. Turn his face down to a simmer, would you? We got to let this thicken up.
Maybe we could meet somewhere in the middle there, buddy. I don't know. But anyway, I mean, just having that, like, it turns your stomach over, even if, because either way, it's going to look kind of absurd. But this way, it has a, that thing that, like, it hits you on a gut level. Yeah, I agree. Well, let's go into that. Let's talk about
You know, I mean, well, we talked enough about Jordy Verrill and the color out of space. Let's just go right into Nightmare Cinema's first episode of The Thing in the Woods, which is another type of color out of space story, or at least a meteorite falling to Earth, and then causing havoc on a camp full of camp counselors. It's kind of a combination story.
You know what's funny? Because of the way that one is structured, I forgot that was...
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
that was the story.
I had to write myself a note because, like, it's like I called it the welder.
Right.
And then I go dash color out of space again.
Yeah.
Those are my notes. I literally talk to myself in my notes, obviously. But it opens up like a traditional camp counselor slasher film, where this welder, who's the serial killer in this, or we're led to believe is attacking the other counselors, and it takes a lot of twists and turns.
Well, actually, so we should go back just a little bit, which is that, like, movie opens up on the street. There's this woman wearing a yellow shirt with the sort of I don't know what, Raoul Duke shooting range glasses, and she walks into the theater and sits down all alone in the theater. All right, a movie starts playing. There's someone on screen covered in blood wearing her exact same outfit, and you're like, well, is that her? Is it not? I don't know. And you're so confused, and she's just running. Like, that's the thing is, like, the movie just starts like as if the horror movie was in the middle of it, and you're kind of into it. Now, I think that device could work. I found myself being really annoyed by what was going on because I was like, is that the right person? I had a lot of questions that were the bad type of questions, like, as opposed to like an intriguing mystery that like kind of draws you out. This is like you're just plunged into the deep end and you're totally lost, and you're trying to find which way is up.
I think that is solved, and I didn't mean to jump ahead. That's my fault. Thanks for bringing us back to that.
Yeah, no problem.
The spine in this one is a theater, and the main girl in the first segment that's who we see walking into a theater. This strange, looks like abandoned theater, but the lights are still on. So I think that would have been solved. Like, the problem that you're having is if they opened with the girl running with blood, you're in the action, it's like the slasher film, and then we're in the theater and she's watching herself. That would have caused some like confusion on your part, but I think the right kind of confusion, as opposed to starting with that kind of slow prod outside of the theater. So basically, everybody that has a segment in this movie, they have to walk into this theater, pick up a ticket, and then they watch a movie of themselves.
Well, sometimes they don't, though. Like, they just like walk into it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, we're getting into some of the issues we have with the movie. Yeah, no, I agree. But yeah, this first episode was interesting because it tried to turn the slasher on itself in a way, but then also incorporated aliens and the meteorite concept again. Yeah, this was my favorite of the segments, though.
That whole movie or that whole segment, The Thing in the Woods, was, it was taking all of these, tropes and, well-worn horror cliches and just like, putting you through a bunch of them. It, in a way, did that Creepshow thing where it's like you start off kind of wanting one thing and then, you want something else later. And where it kind of ended up, I ended up kind of liking it, but I was definitely very annoyed at the very beginning because it was too disorienting in a bad way. Again, from the sort of spine of the story to then the what's it called, in media res, where you're just like, things are just fucking happening. But when they got back to the cabin, I started to get into it a little more, and like how it sort of turned that corner with the color out of space, the spiders out of space. I ended up liking that one a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that they tried to set up that there was more story that was told prior to this by the beginning of it, but which I think they could have told enough of in that flashback when we find out about the spiders. I think there could have been enough of that stuff that we saw in real time happening, like the cop scene, like you were saying, but we could have seen that through the welder, as we find out that it's just the local nerd who is out to save everybody and found this welding outfit that the spiders can't penetrate.
Well, he's not going to save his, I don't know what, camping buddies, but he is going to try to save the world, I guess.
Yeah. He's more going to save, but he does not succeed.
he was Blair in this one.
Right,
so.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But he does not succeed at the end, and we get, like you said, the rumbling of the forehead in the car when we see that he is also possessed by these spiders that turn him into, I guess, just killers.
Right.
They didn't really get into that too much either.
Split your head open and...
Oh, that was cool. That was great. That was excellent. Yeah.
Then put it back together, and you can be normal again.
That was practical.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a practical effect. That was a good one. And then the next issue episode was I called it the face issue because I didn't have a name for it. It was the one starring the original Jason Bourne, Richard Chamberlain, as the doctor. This was the plastic surgery episode.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this is Joe Dante's episode.
Right.
And this one, in my opinion, might be one of those darkly comic, episodes that have to be thrown in there. More of the comedic, because it had that Joe Dante whimsicality to it. Yeah,
I mean, the Thing from the Woods had that sort of comic sensibility as well, in a way. But yeah, you're right. Like this one, it didn't lean into the comedy the way, other Dante movies tend to do, but it was definitely there. Like there was definitely a sense of humor to it most of the way. It was one of those things where like it started off like, okay, this is going. Is it going to be a Twilight Zone? And then it kind of went like even crazier.
Yeah.
But I feel like they missed an opportunity right after she had looked at the computer and kind of tried to run away, and then they caught her. When the next day she woke up, they should have been like, oh, hey, you were off your meds or whatever. Like, oh, it was just all a bad dream. You're having bad dreams over there. And like try to get her to calm down a little bit so that when we get to the next phase of the horror, it's even, scarier or whatever. But
can you explain that one to me? So this girl who's dating a man is sent to a plastic surgeon who his mother works with a lot. Mm-hmm. She's obviously a regular patient, or at least they allude to that. And she has, it seems like, work after work after work done in a 4-day span or something. And this guy just keeps going in and taking more and more and saying that he needs to do more work and do something with the nasal passages now. And she's like, okay, get it done. Finally, she's getting like, why the hell am I still in bandages here? And then we meet the mother.
Right. Like, that's the thing is, like, the conceit of it should have been she just came in to get her, cheek scar fixed. Mm-hmm. And, the guy was, like, upselling her a ton of shit. And she was like, oh, okay, I'll just do whatever you say. As opposed to be like, no, let's just stick to the one thing. And then, after she comes out of there, they're like, oh, there's some complications. We need to bring you back. Okay. And then have it build. It was really, like, weird the way that Richard Chamberlain was, giving her the used car salesman spiel, and she was like, all right, whatever.
I think that part could have worked if, like you said, she denied it, and then he did some work, and it just cleared her up, and she got the work that she needed, and they're like, listen, you need to come back. And then the time she comes back, then there's a little bit more done or something like that.
Right.
And then she's got a perfect face, and then she goes back for that third time, and she becomes what she ultimately becomes, which is, I do not know. Like, it is this creepiest looking thing.
It's a big man! A big man!
And then this guy's mother
went
walks
full
in.
Total Recall with that one.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
What have you been feeding this thing? Blondes.
Oh, man. Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, this one had 5 total episodes within the movie, within, the spine of it. The spine being the theater, the projectionist.
Yeah.
Ooh. So, yeah, I thought this was, I think it's a cool casting choice. I don't think it worked for this movie, though, and I'm not entirely sure I understand the projectionist's point of view of all of this. So I think that there's just some moments of this movie that I'm just unclear of.
This one would have been better off if they had just treated it like, some other anthology films, like New York Stories or something, where it's like they don't even bother with the interstitial. They just go from one thing to the next, because the theater actually didn't do anything.
No.
In fact, it it started off the movie like extremely confusing, and like it would have been better to just like pull that spine out of it and just have a bunch of short films back to back to back kind of thing.
Yeah, because I thought the next one, which was the
the black and white one,
the one that was all in black and white, I thought that one had the biggest creep value to it. I thought that felt the most Twilight Zone to me.
That one was the best one for me, and that was like the way, if you were going to do the strong ending, put that one at the end.
Yeah.
That one was really strong.
What is it now?
I was just thinking that maybe if it's a busy time.
It's not. You're the only one here. We did you a favor by squeezing you in. You did say it was an emergency, didn't you?
Yes.
And why would you cancel the appointment?
Sorry.
Mom, I gotta take a shit.
I can't remember her name, the actress that's in that, but she was in Grey's Anatomy, I believe. But the lead of that episode, Elizabeth Reeser. Yeah, Elizabeth Reeser.
Yeah.
I thought she did a great job. I thought that one visually was incredibly stunning. The moves between the very clean office or waiting room to that dirty room, like it was either they did it with CG and it was really successful, or they just covered that room in dirt and made it, because it sold for me. And then the faces of everything, I had trouble following the ending of that and didn't really get the conclusion of that one. That's just me, though. I'm not saying that it's about a bad movie or anything. There's just times I don't understand.
I know what you mean, but it's like, her experience in this purgatory nether realm or whatever, it was breaking down, and everything was kind of falling apart at the end. Instead of the Charlie Brown muted trombones when she talked to people, it would just be like
Have you seen my children?
Sorry, honey. I haven't seen any children.
All that, which is it was fascinating, because that one felt the most like a nightmare.
Sure.
All the rest of those didn't quite have that same quality, but that one in particular really fit the name of it.
Right.
Again, sort of like what they nailed in Dead of Night with kind of putting you into these moments where at the very end of that, where he's talking to someone and then it cuts in, it's someone else he's talking to, and it has this crazy dream logic, and that's exactly what was happening with the This Way to Egress, right? And the way that things would sort of break down, and her reaction would not to be surprised by it, right? It was just everything you just kind of accept when you're
right in
that space. Anyway, I thought it was really effective, as a horror movie, just as a short film.
Exactly.
It was the strongest one of the bunch. I like I said, I really liked The Thing in the Woods eventually, but it also kind of started off in a weird way.
See how important it is to end something properly.
Yeah.
Save something. Yeah.
Right.
But then the last segment was called Dead, and this it concluded the spine as well, because the kid that is killed while watching himself in the movie theater, he's then let go at the end, and he was being chased because I think he beat death, so he was kind of in between worlds or could see the dead.
Yeah.
In particular, the guy that tried to kill his family is coming back to kill him. That one got a little confusing to me. But what really confused me was that the projectionist just kind of let him go. At the end, and it was just like, get out of here, kid.
Yeah.
I don't think that there was anything really to save. I didn't really get I wasn't rooting for the kid to get out of there.
Right.
I just didn't understand that either, and which is again why I kind of come back to the spine not being too strong in this one, and I don't think it really had any bearing on the individual pieces.
Yeah, exactly, and maybe it would have benefited from the spine, and they tried to do that when they brought all the characters together in the audience at once there, but if they had kind of done the Dead of Night and had that become a sequence at the end and got it to work, it felt like the whole thing would have been stronger. But yeah, I mean, the Dead one was fine. It was okay. Annabeth Gish was in it, and her part was really funny with the Monty Python, God in the sky art or whatever behind her head. Quit groveling, you idiots.
Don't fight it, sweetheart. You can do this. Go to sleep. Just let it go.
ultimately, yeah, like that one was a little, confusing for what you got out of it.
Well, I didn't understand. Was Annabeth Gish, was she like an obsessed mother that wanted her son to be dead with her? And did we not want to feel for the mother anymore? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I felt
right. It's like as if she was no longer herself anymore. She was just something that he was seeing.
But I thought the kid in it was good.
Yeah,
I did think Annabeth Gish was good in it. I thought that there were some interesting pieces in it. I think anything when it comes to, it reminded me of the movie Ghost. It was kind of like that. It was like this, you don't know if you're dead or alive, or like you just saw
you in danger, girl.
Molly, you in danger, girl. But I did enjoy it. I just, I had questions about the ending or the conclusion of it. But yeah, I think that just about wraps up our Anthology 101 here.
Yeah, and real quick, it was fun to kind of watch how this format kind of changed over the years, and how I feel like maybe it was a little self-conscious of having to stitch those things together in Dead of Night because it was an earlier movie, but like that aspect of it actually made it so successful. And again, like had Nightmare Cinema done something like that, it would have made it work a lot better.
No, I agree with you fully. I mean, I do think so. And I think, like you said, if you don't have the through line or the spine or the bookends that are going to tell part of the story, or you're going to come back to it, you don't need it. You can still do the anthology film as separate short films that are just part of a collection.
The two that worked the best for me, the Egress one and the Thing in the Woods, both had that sort of nightmare quality where it's like, yeah, you're disoriented. Things are just like happening all over the place. Thing in the Woods, was done for sort of comedic value, that sort of disorientation. And a way to sort of play on the audience's expectations of what horror movies are. But, Egress is like actually really, really nailed what the nightmare, feeling is like. You kind of felt like you wanted that from the other ones as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. So that was our Anthology 101 as part of our October Horror Festival. Next week, we are going to be talking a little bit deeper than just the blood and guts and monsters and all that. We're going to be going into some psychological horror, some very deep, creepy mind benders. So we're going to be watching Repulsion from 1965. That is, you said Polanski's film, Repulsion?
Yeah.
We are watching Possession from 1981, starring our boy Sam Neill. Very excited to see this. I've never seen that one. As well as Enemy from Denis Villeneuve. Jake Gyllenhaal's in that as well. That was a 2013 film. More of a psychological thriller, but that's horror as well. And I think that this is interesting that we touch on this and that part of the genre.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to explore, a different type of horror that, as we kind of touched on with the sort of Egress story, it has this more sort of psychological turn to it. It's like not so much the blood and guts or jump scares, but like the things that like will stay with you and sort of warp your mind. What those effects are like on you.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms at the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps us to get noticed. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be back next week.
Ciao.
You ain't gonna get in that tub, are you? You get in that water, Jordan. You might as well sign your death warrant.
I'm a goner already, Daddy. Ain't I? Got the stuff out of that meteor on me, and I'm gone. Ain't I?